The Edge of Destruction is flipping wild. I mean, it does make sense, just about, but it's also pretty hard to follow. In some places it's like Alfred Hitchcock, in other parts I want to say it's more like David Lynch. It's definitely not your generic Doctor Who tale, and yet there are some components which modern Who fans will gleefully sink their teeth into. Overall, it's a mad, weird and brilliant ride, and I couldn't resist making a little tribute to it. It also reminded me of something a little more recent, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was at first, but more on that later. The first ever Doctor Who series was just 13 episodes long, and despite the attention drawn by the Daleks, a second series renewal was by no means an instant guarantee. There were 2 episodes to go, so the writers quickly whipped up some character-driven filler to plug in the hole. The result was The Edge of Destruction and its second part, The Brink of Disaster. It took place entirely in the TARDIS and saw a near implosion of the relationship between the Doctor and his companions in a way that's rarely been seen in the show since. I think it's fair to say that the impromptu nature of the writing means that not all of the puzzle pieces fit together on this one. But this is art, folks. Doesn't matter if it makes sense. Barbara screams at a clock, what more do you want? The story starts with a flash and a bang, and 3 out of 4 of the TARDIS's crew hit the deck, and when they wake up, everyone is a little bit spaced, on edge, forgetful, and not entirely trusting in one another. In particular, sweet granddaughter Susan becomes a rampant liability. Why is everybody suddenly so intense? Well, that does get explained at the end, kind of. So begins a mystery as to where they've landed, why they seem unable to even reach the TARDIS's control console despite the fact that it's right there in front of them, and what force is intent on messing with their minds. They're in outer space, aliens exist, so anything's possible, right? Well, it doesn't explain why, when Barbara suggested that something got in the ship, that Ian can only sarcastically respond by saying, an animal or a man or something. Seriously, he's met the Daleks and that's the best that his sarcasm switch can come up with? Barbara explains that they've been through a lot and... Wait a minute, is she staring right at us? Alongside this, the TARDIS scanner is acting up. It starts to show pictures of England, and also similar to England, the planet Quinis of the 4th universe, which Barbara recognises from where they lost the TARDIS 4 or 5 journeys back. I'm not sure how tight the continuity is on that one. They went from present day to Stone Age to Scar Road to here, so... Anyway, confused? Luckily, the Doctor is on hand to characteristically defuse the situation by accusing Ian and Barbara of sabotage and wiping them out with a sedative. He later threatens to throw them off the ship. Seriously, the First Doctor is really hard work on this one. Both Barbara and Susan suffer a near nervous breakdown after seeing the stopped clock, and Barbara even goes as far as to throw her watch across the room. Time has ceased altogether. I'd love to have watched this back in the 60s. A 7-day gap between episodes, no means of recording, bend over to scratch your foot and you'll miss a vital explanation that you have no means of recapping on. By the time we've reached part 2, 3 of the characters are in their pyjamas. The Doctor summarises that there is a strong force controlling the TARDIS. Something is warning them. The TARDIS is on the brink of destruction. It's going to explode. A big bang. Is this some kind of echo of the 11th Doctor's TARDIS exploding through time? Furthermore, is the warning coming from the Doctor's future selves, calling on him to join their collective fight for Gallifrey in the deep future? Is this the point where all of that happens? No. The real explanation is actually just as good but also hilarious. One of the switches was stuck. That's all it was. The fast return switch. This one here with the words fast return written on the console just above it. All of that because of that. Instead of taking Ian and Barbara back through time to their present day England, the jammed switch took them all the way back to the birth of the solar system, where the primordial burst of energy would be sufficient to blow up even the TARDIS. Preceding this revelation was a whopper of a speech from the Doctor. The lights dim, and the Doctor lays out this process of cosmic creation with excitable mad scientist glee. It's a seriously brilliant bit of acting from William Hartnell. The Doctor seems to have forgotten that there's even other people next to him. Unfortunately, it does not explain the brash behaviour of our adventurers or the stoppage of time. Good job we had our keen-eyed protagonist to shed light on all of that, and by that I mean Barbara. Barbara pieces it all together way before the Doctor does. The TARDIS is instinctively defending itself by stopping everyone going near the controls, getting inside their heads, and dictating their actions to do whatever is necessary to stop them from travelling to that perilous point in time. You want to know how cool Barbara is? Well, I'll tell you. It's Barbara who explains to a skeptical Doctor that his spaceship is indeed capable of thinking for itself. Consider the ramifications of this. The Doctor has always alluded to the fact that his TARDIS is alive, right? But it's understandable that the first Doctor had not yet built up this intuitive relationship with this, the most faithful of all of his companions, because in the grand scheme of things, he'd only just stolen it from Gallifrey. But thereafter, whichever of the Doctor's faces you're gazing upon, just remember the first time when it was proposed that the TARDIS was alive. And it was Barbara who said it. That makes her one of the most important companions of, well, all time. Barbara is also pretty swift in her explanation, and the Doctor spends more time explaining how a switch can get jammed than he does explaining how a sentient ship is capable of manipulating its crew to prevent an explosion caused by the birth of a solar system. If it took you 10 goes to piece this episode together, that's understandable. Anyway, they make friends and have a snowball fight. There's a giant's footprint. Consider the edge of destruction and exercise in psychology, arguably the first that the show had ever tried out. The willingness to experiment and the faithfulness in the delivery of its actors made this mind game two-parter a real vintage treasure. It's easy enough to poke a few holes in it now, and I guess I did to an extent, but overall, the intensive grip of this serial still holds today. Speaking of which, I remembered what it reminded me of. It was in fact one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who episodes of modern times. Listen. No monster, no tangible villain, only an irrational fear of the unknown, and a small nudge in the right direction by those closest to home. Both of these stories serve as an excellent breath of fresh air in the Doctor Who universe, one very recent and one way back near the start. I'm pretty sure I've forgotten about other Doctor Who episodes which had no alien threat and dealt solely in psychology. Hit me up in the comments with your favourites and hit that subscribe button along the way. Have a good one.